I'll just give it one more minute. All right, let's jump in. Can everybody see the PowerPoint on the screen? And everyone can hear me? Okay. All right, and if everyone can just keep their mics muted so we can avoid that background noise, that would be really appreciated. But my name is Vanessa Cullen. I'm Delaware State Housing Authority's Emergency Management Coordinator. My role here largely has been to create a statewide disaster housing strategy, which will give you a brief background on what that is. And our newest endeavor is this technical assistance pilot program for disaster housing preparedness. And we'll also explain what that is, what the eligibility to apply is, and what the timeline looks like. But before we dive in, let me introduce some of my colleagues. We have University of Delaware Institute for Public Administration's Colin Willard and Jennifer Reeds with us here today. And Colin will be co-presenting with me. And we also have Jared Genova of Civics, which is a contracted firm who's been supporting the emergency management work DSHA has been doing. So you'll be hearing from all three of us. And at the end, we'll do some questions. We'll just open it up. I think the presentation will be, don't worry, it won't be too long, but I'm going to hand it over to Jared if you want to get started.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate the time coming off of a long weekend for many of you. So today, what we really want to do before talking about the logistics of the program we're introducing today is give a little bit of background about how we got here. And so we're going to go through, just do a quick overview of what disaster housing is, what the strategies are, and the resources are that we're basing a lot of this work on. So starting off quickly here, disaster housing is a few things. Many of you are already familiar with these concepts, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, disaster housing is, number one, at a basic level, options to house people displaced by an emergency event or a disaster. That could include emergency shelters immediately after a disaster, interim or temporary housing a little bit later, and then permanent housing, hopefully quickly after that disaster. Disaster housing also encompasses the assistance provided to people affected by disaster to make sure that they can have stable homes after that emergency and to support their self-sufficiency. So it could be direct or indirect resources or assistance provided. And just as a reminder here, it's really fundamental to disaster recovery. Housing is fundamental all the time, but especially after an emergency event. Next slide, please. Disaster housing requires a few things. And over the course of now nearly 2 years of planning process with the state of Delaware and a variety of partners, a lot of these things keep coming up. Disaster housing requires good coordination and planning among all levels of government, state, local, and federal. It also requires coordination and planning among NGOs, nonprofits, and other private organizations, because everyone is involved in this process after a disaster. It also requires policies and procedures to enable that housing recovery. It's not automatic. So really the goal here is to make sure that those policies and procedures are pointing towards safe, efficient, equitable, also affordable, resilient, and sustainable housing for the short and long term. Next. So I mentioned the planning process that led us here. So the disaster housing strategy for the state of Delaware is something that we've been working on now for nearly 2 years. There's a link going in the chat for it right now. Let's talk about it real quick. So just high level background, some work had been done on this a number of years ago, and then the Delaware State Housing Authority took up the mantle to update some of the plans and policies in place to create a more holistic housing strategy. Working with the Delaware Emergency Management Agency, DEMA, the DSHA and DEMA work together to update these policies and also the Delaware Emergency Operations Plan. This is really just to indicate that this has buy-in from all levels of government, various agencies, and is coordinated with even federal agencies like FEMA. Some of the language here you'll see, Recovery Support Function, for example, RSF, that's borrowed from federal partners so that we can all be aligned in how we move forward. The disaster housing strategy is a living document. So it's been published, it's publicly available. You can see it, it's in the chat, it's on the screen. But it's something that we're always going to be seeking input for to make sure that it's relevant moving forward. Next, please. So using the disaster housing strategy, there are a number of goals for it, but just to highlight a few here. Number one might be obvious, but it serves as an operational guide for post-disaster housing recovery. It's focused on housing, but it really touches many aspects of what goes on during a short or a long-term recovery period. There's also information and resources in there about housing, about other ways that housing touches those other sectors. Also helps formalize that coordination and communication across different stakeholder groups. Important to us today also is identifying state and local resource gaps. The strategy is very clear about those and where we really need more attention from both state partners and local partners, like those of you on the call today. And it also provides recommendations for preparedness activities. So these preparedness activities are really what we want to start talking about today and how we can all support a more efficient and equitable recovery. Next, please. So this is just a snapshot. This is something that's featured in the strategy that shows a timeline of that recovery. There are a lot of details in here about the types of actions that take place pre-disaster, post-disaster, longer term after disaster. But if you just take a look here, you can see that the red spike there is the event, so to speak, the disaster event. But then we have a few different phases to focus on: sheltering in the days and weeks after disaster, interim housing in the weeks or months after disaster, and permanent or long-term housing also in those months and years. One of the goals of the disaster housing strategy and all of these preparedness actions that we're going to be talking about is to shorten this timeline. How do we get from pre-disaster to that permanent housing as quickly as possible? So that's what a lot of the actions and descriptions in the strategy, and we'll talk about in a second, the preparedness guide, are all about. So just to summarize a few of the recommendations coming out of the strategy. I'm not going to go through all of these, but a few are very relevant to why we're here today. Number one is provide technical assistance to local and county governments. We know that this is something that can only happen with good coordination and communication. This is a step to take in order to make sure that everyone at all levels of government and our external partners are on the same page and moving in the same direction. Number two here, identify land use parameters and analyze for the potential siting of temporary housing. This is something that requires attention at the local level. When you think about it, housing development is a land use, right? So at its core, you need to make sure that the housing can be sited there based on the laws and policies that you have in place. And that's controlled at a variety of levels. So many of you at the local government level work on this every day. Skipping down a few, one of the things that the strategy recommends is to introduce the strategy to other partners. And this is just a way to make sure, again, that we're all coordinated and have the same information. That could be a real crisis during disaster. It can exacerbate problems if people have different ideas of what the path forward is. And then a few more down here, assess capacity to prepare and manage and implement potential disaster funding. This is something where disaster funding can come and will come from a variety of different sources. Those resources might be constrained, even more so than they are typically. So being able to, one, understand what it takes to manage those new resources or manage them differently is really critical. And then be ready to do it during a crisis period is something to take into account now prior to an event. All right, I mentioned it already, but in addition to the disaster housing strategy at the state level, one of those recommendations was developing further preparedness actions. So we have another guide. This is another document that's specifically for local jurisdictions and other partners to use to help support the implementation of the disaster housing strategy. So let's talk about that for a second. So really, this is the reason you're here today. So we know that effective disaster housing requires participation at all levels of government. We also know that to enable improved disaster housing preparedness, facilitate housing recovery, coordinate and align with different strategies and communication patterns, we need to align. So the preparedness guide helps do some of this. And this technical assistance that we're introducing today is based on these preparedness guides. The guide itself is a resource for towns, cities, and counties. It really seeks to show kind of how to support the state's disaster housing strategy. And it has a long list of preparedness actions in a variety of categories that are relevant to disaster housing. Building capacity, planning for housing recovery and developing policies, how to work on land use and development to enable that, permitting, and then also things like housing assistance programs, and finally, community engagement. Again, making sure that not just the decision makers, the government agencies, or the partners who are working on this all the time are aware, but that the community understands what those policies and programs are as well. The guide itself goes through, like I said, many of these actions. It identifies a level of effort for them. It can help localities prioritize the preparedness activities and ultimately help assess local resources and resource gaps. It's designed to be a how-to guide and something that really anyone at the local government level can take advantage of and use as a set of goals or a way to mark progress on the things that you're already doing. There's more than 30 items in there across those different categories, and just to introduce a little bit of a preview of what some of this technical assistance will provide. It's to help rank, prioritize, and then ultimately implement some of those items as we're going through and identifying what's been done, what could be done, what should be done. So now I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues at the University of Delaware to talk a little bit more directly about the program and about the technical assistance. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. Hi, everyone. Colin Willard, Assistant Policy Scientist at the University of Delaware's Institute for Public Administration. I also have Jen Wrights on the call today as well, who will be working together on this with as well. So yeah, Vanessa, you can go ahead to the next slide. As Jared kind of previewed a little bit, so we've been talking with Vanessa at DSHA and with Jared and the civics team about, how we can essentially kind of follow up the effort that they've, carried out over the past couple of years to put together the disaster housing strategy. And as Jared kind of previewed, there's a lot of different recommendations that come through in the preparedness guide. And the idea here is to work with a cohort of local municipalities in a pilot program to essentially enact some of those recommendations from that preparedness guide. So as Jared mentioned, they cover a pretty broad range of categories, and our goal here is to help you work through and process that the preparedness guide, and essentially help you evaluate and assess which recommendations might be most relevant to your community, might be most timely, might be most interesting, from a community perspective, generally just based on the considerations that you're valuing most. So a rough structure for what we're envisioning here is kind of a 3-phase technical assistance program. So we've worked with Vanessa over the past few months to put together a bit of an outline for this. We are going to, kind of make everything responsive to the participants that we're able to get into the cohort, just to make sure that everyone's able to participate to the fullest extent, and that all of our, in-person engagement opportunities kind of line up so that everyone can be there. So phase 1, essentially, we're envisioning this to take place throughout the fall. Probably at this point, probably going to bleed into a little bit into the winter of 26 as well. But what we have envisioned here is 3 cohort workshops. So as mentioned, we're looking to get a cohort of municipalities that would, be part of this technical assistance group. Likely it'll be 3 municipalities, and Vanessa will get into a little bit more on the selection process and the criteria that DSHA will use to evaluate that. But for the cohort workshops, we're envisioning 3 of them. The first one will kind of take an even deeper dive into the disaster housing strategy and the preparedness guide that Jared highlighted. We'll dig into a lot of those different recommendations and start to talk with you all about, why they're there, why they're important, the effort level that might be involved, the administrative processes, things like that. In the second workshop, we're envisioning a bit of a self-assessment. So looking, internally at your community, understanding the disaster risk and the housing vulnerability in particular, as this program is going to be really tailored towards housing in particular. And so essentially during that session, cohort members would work through a self-assessment, understand available mapping tools, different resources out there to assess and communicate risk and vulnerability to the community. And then in the third part, after, kind of understanding the guide, understanding, the different preparedness options, understanding your own risk and your own vulnerabilities, we'll then start to work with you to prioritize those preparedness guide action items based upon what's most relevant for your community. And so throughout these 3 sessions, over the course of it, the idea is to essentially put together a pretty comprehensive, you might think of it as like a SWOT analysis. So understanding your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and, essentially kind of preparing action items accordingly based upon that. So we're envisioning these being in-person workshops. We want to get the cohort of municipalities together to, kind of learn from each other, discuss, issues that are coming up in the community that are related to disaster housing, talk about, different challenges or things that might come up in the process. And, during those sessions, we're looking to get some subject matter expert guest speakers involved. As mentioned, some self-assessment activities to assess your own vulnerability and risk, as well as internal capacity, and your ability to kind of carry out some of these functions, perhaps if a disaster would happen. And as mentioned, we want to make this responsive to what each member of the cohort's able to do. So we haven't set any final workshop dates at this point, and we want to hopefully do 3 of these. But if it turns out that not every cohort member can make them, we may adjust the format of this. Vanessa, you can go to the next slide. So after phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 are kind of going to happen concurrently. But essentially the idea here is to, as mentioned, kind of dig into those preparedness guide action items. So phase 2, we'll be focusing on a pre-disaster recovery ordinance. So, as Jared kind of talked about, there's a lot of preparedness activities that can be taken ahead of time so that you're ready in case a disaster happens. You can look to a lot of different examples across the country, either in recent years or even happening currently, where different kinds of administrative processes, quote unquote red tape, things like that can, kind of get in the way and make it challenging to rebuild and recover effectively. And so the idea here is the pre-disaster recovery ordinance will set you up for success when you, God willing, are hopefully not having to deal with this at any point in the future. But if, a disaster does happen, this sets you up to, recover faster. So, setting different kinds of recovery operation protocols and serving, essentially as a precursor to a more comprehensive planning process that would, occur after a disaster. So phase 3 is kind of a continuation of phase 2. It's, there's a lot of, as Jared mentioned, there's a lot of different options within the preparedness guide, and we'll be focusing on the pre-disaster recovery ordinance piece in phase 2. And in phase 3, some of those additional action items that you may have prioritized in phase 1, you'll be able to implement those as well. And we're looking to provide 100 hours of direct technical assistance per municipality across phases 2 and 3. So, as we work through phase 1, through the workshop and the prioritization process, we'll kind of figure out where the effort kind of should be focused, depending on, which recommendations you're most interested in moving forward with. So as mentioned, there's a lot of different options that could, be chosen for phase 3, but a couple just, couple examples would be identifying potential sites for interim housing, developing post-disaster tenant protections, or maybe a community advisement board that could provide input on disaster housing recovery plans or processes. There's a lot of other recommendations, though, ranging from community engagement to a variety of different administrative processes, code enforcement, related ordinances and things like that as well. So yeah, essentially phase 2 and phase 3 running concurrently. We'll prioritize that pre-disaster recovery ordinance, which can kind of be pieced together and customized based upon each municipality's individual considerations. And then in phase 3, you'll take up some additional action items that you've prioritized in phase 1. Next slide, Vanessa. So yeah, just to kind of highlight some of the program goals and expected outcomes. As mentioned, the first part is really receiving that training and workshop material featuring the subject matter experts on disaster housing preparedness and recovery operations. As mentioned, across those workshops, you will complete a SWOT analysis to essentially help to analyze and understand opportunities and threats related to disaster housing. You'll form a comprehensive understanding of your jurisdiction's hazard landscape and existing local recovery capacity. In phase 2, you'll develop and implement that pre-disaster recovery ordinance. As mentioned, phase 3 will then be selecting those additional preparedness guide action items, depending upon what's most top of mind to your community. And then lastly, just as these items 6 and 7 here, just, understanding the relationship between the preparedness guide, those action items, and, how they can provide your community with an efficient, equitable post-disaster recovery. And then ultimately, empowering local government officials to utilize, your municipal autonomy to kind of select and prioritize what you're most interested in doing. And we'll be here to help you kind of navigate through that process and provide some assistance as you take up some of these recommendations and considerations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over again to Vanessa then to close us out and kind of talk a little bit about how DSHA is going to request applications and select members of the cohort. So Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you both for giving the background and then talking about the project's design. The program's design. There we go. It's Monday to me, everybody. All right, so how to apply. We wanted to make this really simple. This isn't supposed to be a heavy lift, and it's 2 steps. So you just need to email me saying my jurisdiction, the town of, the city of, the county of is interested in applying. And then we ask that you complete the survey. That's both now in the chat and also there's a QR code for it on the screen. The survey just kind of goes into where your municipality or jurisdiction currently stands as far as its housing landscape. It asks some questions about capacity, issues that you're already aware of, just to give us kind of a starting point if you're selected, so we know perhaps what you're looking for, what your concerns are, and we can work with you and meet you where you are. Eligibility, real simple, you're all eligible. We, again, didn't want to make this laborious. The whole idea is to strengthen the state, right? So everyone in the state is eligible. Counties would be applying on behalf of unincorporated areas, whereas municipalities would be applying for themselves. We pushed the deadline a little bit. We wanted to give time for this webinar, the question and answers at the end of it, and then for people to go back and relay what they heard here, talk about if you're interested. So we're asking that everybody apply by, I didn't even put the date on here. All right, let's say the 22nd because that date is here. I was going to say the Wednesday before, but let's just do the 22nd of September, and we'll let everybody know by the end of that week who has been chosen. The cohort will be chosen based on only a couple of criteria. One is interest. This is not mandated. This is meant to be a supportive option and it's meant to be helpful. It's not meant for the state to take over. We really just want to provide you technical assistance if you want it. So interest is one of the criteria, as well as capacity. We will be asking the cohort members who are selected to sign an MOU with UD saying that you will see this through to the end. It is free to everybody, but it's, DSHA is kind of laying out the costs. So we want to make sure that the people selected really take advantage of it. So, commitment level, and then we are hoping to find all 3 cohort members in the same county. And that is simply because it'll be easier if we're working with the group that has to follow the same overarching plans. It's just a lot heavier of a lift to ask Colin and Jen to really know the ins and outs of all 3 counties, land use and zoning ordinances and codes. So we're going to just deep dive into one county. But while this is not yet set, the goal would be to have another cohort down the road. So say we start with Sussex County this time, perhaps Kent County could be next time, and maybe eventually Newcastle. Again, that's me getting ahead of myself a little bit, but that's the hope. We'll see how the pilot program goes first. That is all that I have to say. I will just add that the guide that Colin and Jared spoke about will be available to everybody. We're not keeping it hidden for cohort members only. We will share it out. You guys are all welcome to take it upon yourselves to follow some of the action items suggested within. It's just that the cohort members will get the technical assistance where we'll support the development and implementation of the items chosen. But I'd like to turn it over to you guys. Does anybody have any questions about either the disaster housing strategy, the guide, the program, the application process?
Vanessa, it's Jamie Whitehouse here from Sussex County. Good morning.
Hey, Jamie, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, yourself. Can you hear me okay? So,
Yes.
sure, thank you. We're interested because this might align with something we're doing on the county level anyway with our emergency management team over in the EOC. So if we have further questions, can we circle back with you by email?
Yeah, of course. My email is actually on the next page for anyone who needs it. Take the next week or two to figure out what your questions are, and I'll work with you to get your application in.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Vanessa, I was just going to chime in real quick. I think, so one of your slides, I think actually did have a different application date on it. So I think one of them said Wednesday, September 17th, and then
What I was thinking.
the other one you showed was the 22nd. So I just wanted to make sure we give everyone enough, like a firm date.
Well, let's just do the 22nd because I said it.
Yeah, you
But
set the precedent.
is a Monday. Yeah, it's already out there. I can't take it back. But that's a Monday. So now we'll just push getting back to everybody with the cohort selected by that Friday, which should be the 26th, I think. Yes, I mathed right. I can put that in the chat too if that's helpful. Sorry for the confusion, everybody. I missed it. I mean, if nobody has any questions at this time, I don't feel the need to hold everyone till 12. I just wanted to give time in case people were unclear about anything. Everyone should have my email address. You guys should all have access to the survey. So I guess from here, it's in your hands. If you'd like to apply, please do. I'll stick around in case anybody wants to ask anything, but thank you all.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Hey, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Quast, Town of Milton. So this application, you said just send me an email just saying, yes, we would like to be considered. Was there
Yes,
other?
but I believe Milton applied already.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I was like, wait a minute, dude, is this for something new that
No,
sounds
we
just
have
the same,
received
or-
some.
Okay.
Yeah, we've received a
Okay,
few
okay.
applications already.
So I'm already part of the lottery. Okay, got it. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can stay on till 11:40 in case anyone has anything. If you guys want to jump, I understand.
All
Yeah, I
good.
think we just have one left outside of our group. So we'll see if she has anything. But
Jennifer, I acknowledge that I said your name wrong earlier and I said Reitz instead of Wrights, and I am so sorry.
It's all good. I'm used to it. It's a hard name to get right.
I imagine people just looking at it wouldn't know which way to go with it, but I still apologize.
I appreciate that much. But great job, great turnout, everything. Really
Yeah,
happy
it
to
was
see.
a good turnout. It was over 25 people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All 3 counties.
Yeah.
oh, I didn't see someone from Kent County hopped on. That's good though.
Sarah was on, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did Brandon hop on at one point? May have.
I think so. Yeah, I think I saw his name, and Matt Rogers was on as well. So
Mhm.
Newcastle County had both land use and Chris. I think Chris was
And
on too.
Chris.
So
He was. He had emailed me saying that they weren't coordinating. So like if there was a willing applicant, take them instead. But
maybe they had a breakthrough. I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
interesting to see the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh on.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting. I'd be kind of
Right?
curious what their angle is there.
Absolutely. And there were at least 2 people on from them, if
Yeah.
not 3. But
I don't know who forwarded that to them,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's interesting.